But again, the president's tariffs are raising the cost of construction materials. So this is sort of a welcome sign to those who do want to see housing relief delivered, via golden ribbon packaged from President Trump potentially in just a few weeks.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by White House reporter Christian Datoc. And Christian, President Trump has a couple of battles going on in New Orleans. You've written a story about one of them. What's happening?
So there was an indictment passed down by DOJ last month fingering LaToya Cantrell and Jeff Vappie, a former New Orleans police officer, in a years-long corruption scheme. And essentially what HUD is doing, as the president is contemplating sending National Guard troops down to New Orleans, they are turning off the spigot of HUD funding because of the way that Mayor Cantrell appointed Vappie, who was not only her boyfriend but a member of her protective detail at the time, to serve on the New Orleans Public Housing Authority board. Now, what we know here, HUD has been sort of used as a cudgel to try and move some of these sanctuary cities.
Even.
Wow, I'm not going to call you out on that one.
Yeah.
But seriously, this is the first time they're really looking at a red state and trying to exert the president's will and extend his agenda in the face of what they're calling, and quite frankly, even people in New Orleans are calling, outright blatant corruption. There's a couple of things here. One, this doesn't mean the city won't get any HUD funds moving forward, but as long as Cantrell is the executive in charge of liaising with HUD, the funds that she's previously procured cannot go out the door. She can appoint someone else to serve as that liaison, but given her pending criminal trial and her exit from office in January, it seems pretty unlikely that HUD's going to be sending any more money to New Orleans over these next couple of months.
So you also had a sit down with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and went to Waffle House or something like that. What were some of your takeaways from that?
Well, the Treasury Secretary has sort of emerged as one of the most influential members of the president's cabinet this second term. He's the one they send out on television to calm the markets. And on Monday, Labor Day, he was the one they deployed to 3 diners across the DMV area to try and drum up some publicity for the no tax on tips and no tax on overtime provisions within the One Big Beautiful bill. But, I shadowed Bessent throughout the morning. We actually got breakfast together during that interview. And he made some news. I was kind of surprised with how forthright he was, not only sort of pushing back on the criticism of the way that the administration has tamped down on traditional economic statistics like GDP and the jobs reports in favor of things like focusing on CapEx. But he also talked about how the president might be declaring the first ever national housing emergency from the executive branch. Housing is a huge issue in this country. We have like a 4 million unit shortfall at the moment. And it's something you normally hear from folks on the other side of the aisle when it comes to talking about affordability and lowering the cost of houses. Now, of course, we know the president has been focused preeminently on interest rates. He fired one Fed governor just a few weeks ago, and he's been calling Jay Powell too late for the better part of the last 6 months or so, trying to get those rates to come down. And it's kind of a welcome sign. But there are some Republicans who are saying we're straying a little too close to socialism here, essentially. The federal government needs to stay out of this market because it will reset itself eventually. But again, the president's tariffs are raising the cost of construction materials. So this is sort of a welcome sign to those who do want to see housing relief delivered, via golden ribbon packaged from President Trump potentially in just a few weeks.
So the president, a big marketing guy, he really cares about what things are named, and they've talked about renaming the Defense Department the Department of War. Obviously, we have the big beautiful bill. What's the latest federal agency that he's tinkering with a rebrand on?
Well, this remains to be seen if this will actually, come to fruition. But Republicans have put an amendment in one of the FY26 funding bills to rename AmeriCorps, of course, the independent federal agency that matches volunteers with social work programs and volunteer programs. They want to call it the America First Corps. Obviously, America First is a calling card of the president, along with MAGA.
It beat Make AmeriCorps Great Again in the focus groups?
It's a little lengthy, I think. They had to shrink it down a little bit. And, technically this isn't necessarily a huge move, but it's just another indication of the way that Republicans and Trump in this second term are trying to use language and optics to advance their agenda. Donald Trump, perhaps more than any other president in history, has shown us that you can sometimes mask policy by being wildly charismatic and by branding, this group which has been maligned by this administration, to be quite frank. They've froze like $400 million in funding.
Sure.
They furloughed, roughly 75 to 90% of the agency's staff.
It's never really been a big Republican
funding
priority.
It has not, and I do think that the way that they're trying to wrap Trump around this new agency shows that they are taking over the federal government, and Trumpism or the MAGA doctrine is here to stay, at least within the Republican Party.
Thank you, Christian. You can read Christian and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.